quiet Texas town back in 1981, three identical young boys vanished without a single clue. They had been playing outside their home, just a normal afternoon. And then, nothing. For decades, their disappearance remained one of the town's most haunting mysteries. But 30 years later, a simple old photograph would trigger something no one expected. A detail their mother had missed for years suddenly stood out, and it changed everything. It was a warm afternoon near the Texas-Mexico border. The Rodriguez family backyard was filled with laughter, balloons, and the buzz of conversation. It was little Tommy's birthday, and neighbors from all around had come to celebrate. Among the guests were Evie and Walter Marlowe, longtime residents of the neighborhood. Evie, now in her 60s, still moved with grace, though time had marked her face with soft lines and a quiet heaviness in her eyes, the kind you carry when you've spent a lifetime searching for something. While chatting casually with her neighbor about gardening, Evie noticed a man she didn't recognize entering through the patio door, holding the hand of a boy, maybe 8 years old. "Sorry we're late," the man said to no one in particular, but Evie's focus was instantly drawn to the boy. As he darted across the yard to join the other children, something about his appearance hit her like a wave. His green checkered overalls, the yellow straps, the curls in his dark hair. Her breath caught. Without thinking, Evie stepped away from the conversation and hurried toward the boy, her heart pounding. She gently touched his shoulder, urging him to turn around. "Where did you get those clothes?" she asked, barely managing to speak. Her hand instinctively reached toward his hair, as if muscle memory had taken over. Startled, the boy backed away and ran to his father. "Daddy!" he cried out. The man rushed over, placing a protective hand on his son's shoulder, eyes cautious. "Is everything all right?" he asked, more surprised than angry. She scared me," the boy whispered. Evie stood frozen, trembling. "Those clothes," she repeated, her voice cracking. "Where did you find them?" The man furrowed his brow. "Excuse me?" he asked, gently stepping between his son and Evie. "What exactly is going on?" Walter arrived just then, placing his arm around his wife. His eyes quickly scanned the boy, and he too seemed momentarily shaken. "I'm sorry," Walter said calmly. "My wife didn't mean to startle anyone. It's just your son's outfit. It looks exactly like what our boys were wearing the day they disappeared. We had triplets. They vanished 30 years ago. The overalls, the colors, they're identical." The father's expression softened. I had no idea. I just bought them months ago. At a store, I think. I honestly don't remember where." Evie, still shaken, pleaded, "Please, I just want to see the tag, just to know if it's the same brand." But Walter gently held her hand. "Honey, he's not Lucas. He's not Noah. He's not Gabriel." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been watching from a few steps away, stepped in gently. "Evie, sweetheart, maybe it's best if you rest." Walter nodded, thanking the hosts and guiding Evie out of the yard. "I'm really sorry we caused any worry," he said to the father. This has been with us a long time." "No hard feelings," the man said kindly. "We just moved here. Thought the party would be a good way to meet people. I truly didn't mean to upset anyone." Walter walked Evie the short distance home, helping her onto the couch as he went to prepare some tea. When he returned, he handed her the warm cup, his own hands slightly trembling. "I didn't want to scare that boy," Evie whispered through tears. "But when I saw those clothes..." Walter sat beside her and nodded. "You had a panic response, sweetheart. It's okay. I can't forget them, Walter. Even now." He took her hand in his. "I know, I haven't either. They'd be adults by now, all three of them." And in that quiet room, the weight of 3 missing sons lingered, heavier than ever. "I know," Evie whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "I just feel so embarrassed. Always bringing up the past, making people uncomfortable." Walter placed a steady hand on hers. "Evie, we don't have to forget our boys," he said gently but firmly. I was shaken too when I saw that kid's clothes. They were almost identical. Green checkered overalls, yellow straps, long sleeves. Evie sat up straighter. "I want to see their photos again, the ones where they're wearing those outfits." Walter hesitated for a moment. "They're in the attic, in that old box. We haven't opened it in over 20 years. "Please," Evie said quietly, "if it helps me calm down." Walter sighed, then nodded. "All right, I'll get it." She listened as he made his way upstairs, the creak of the attic ladder echoing faintly through the quiet house. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a dusty cardboard box, which he set gently on the coffee table. Wiping it clean with a towel, the two of them carefully opened the lid. Inside were pieces of the life they once knew: small toys, baseball gloves, 3 identical stuffed bears, crayon drawings, and homework papers still decorated with gold stars. Each object held the weight of a memory, frozen in time. "The album should be at the bottom," Walter said softly. "We packed it last." Sure enough, under the final layer of items, a worn, leather-bound album appeared. Walter lifted it carefully, setting it on his lap. Though it hadn't been touched in decades, the leather felt smooth, worn by years of love and grief. Sitting close together on the couch, they opened the album. The first pages showed 3 newborns in a hospital crib. Then came images of toddlers walking side by side, birthday cakes with 3 sets of hands reaching to blow out the candles, beach days, pillow forts, all 3 boys moving as one. "They were always so connected," Evie murmured, her fingers brushing over a photo of the boys building a sandcastle. Then came the photo they had both been looking for. The boys were standing proudly in front of the house, wearing the same overalls Evie had remembered: green checkered fabric, yellow straps, long sleeves, smiles wide and carefree. "This was taken that morning," Walter said quietly, "just an hour before they disappeared." Evie leaned in. "Wait, look closely. The boy at the party, his clothes weren't quite the same. The green was brighter, the lines thinner, and the straps on his overalls were stitched differently." Walter nodded slowly. "You're right. They're similar, but not identical. Same style, but different make." Evie sighed, her voice barely audible. "I feel awful about how I reacted. That poor boy, and his dad. What were their names again?" "Malvin and Rowan," Walter replied. "They moved here about 3 months ago. I think you should talk to them later, just to clear the air." "I will," she nodded. "I must have scared them." They continued to study the photo, sharing quiet memories of that last morning. Evie laughed softly, remembering how Gabriel insisted on wearing his overalls backwards until she managed to convince him to turn them around, and how Noah somehow got grass stains on his knee before they'd even finished breakfast. Walter reached for the teapot to pour more tea, but Evie suddenly touched his arm. "Wait, look at the background." He paused. "Isn't that the Cadillac Lucas loved so much?" she asked. Walter leaned in. At the edge of the photo, partially obscured, was the unmistakable front end of a reddish-brown Cadillac parked across the street. "You're right," he said slowly, eyes narrowing. "Lucas was obsessed with that car." "That's Mr. Howard Fielding's Cadillac," Evie added. "Remember? Their school teacher? He barely drove it, said it was his prized possession." Walter nodded. "Every kid at that school knew about that car. It was legendary." Evie turned the photo over, searching for any notes, then back again, examining it more closely. "Are you absolutely sure this was taken the morning they disappeared?" "Yes," Walter said firmly. "But that's strange," she whispered. "Howard moved out of town a week before the boys vanished. Remember how all the parents came to his farewell party?" Walter frowned. "I still remember the goodbye, but I'm telling you, This photo was taken that same morning. They exchanged a long, uneasy look. Then Walter set the album aside and dug through the box again until he found a yellowed Kodak envelope. Inside, the original negatives. The date stamped clearly on the back. "Look at this," he said, holding it out. "The film was developed 2 days after they disappeared. It's all there. These photos were taken the day they vanished." Evie rubbed her arms, suddenly chilled despite the warmth of the room. If that really was Mr. Howard's car, then what was it doing on our street after he'd supposedly left town? "He might have seen something that day," Evie murmured. "If he was still in town, the police would have questioned him. But they never mentioned interviewing our boy's teacher, which means he really must have been gone before it happened." Walter noticed the tension building in her voice and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Evie, it could just be a coincidence," he said calmly. "That might not have even been Mr. Howard's Cadillac. It could have belonged to anyone. But we knew everyone on this street," Evie replied, her eyes fixed on the photo. "We were close with every family back then. If someone else owned a car like that, we'd have remembered. Or maybe it wasn't a neighbor," Walter suggested. "Could have been a visitor, someone just passing through. And don't forget, the police saw all our photos, including this one. They went over every lead. If that car had been Howard's, they would have run the license plate and told us." Evie took a long breath and nodded slowly as Walter handed her another sip of tea. The warmth helped ease the knot in her chest. "You're probably right," she said at last. "It's probably nothing." Walter gave her a soft smile and closed the album. Evie, though, quietly slipped the photo out, wanting to keep it nearby. Together, they began placing the memories back into the box, each one a small fragment of a life paused too soon. Toys, drawings, the stuffed animals, symbols of futures that never had the chance to unfold. As Walter sealed the box, he caught sight of the clock on the mantel and shot to his feet. "Oh no, I completely lost track of time. My checkup's at 11:50, and it's already 11:30. "It's Saturday," Evie said, rising quickly. "The clinic closes early today." They rushed to gather his things, his insurance card, the list of medications, and the little notebook where he recorded his blood pressure. Within minutes, Walter was ready. "Are you sure you'll be okay here alone?" he asked, pausing at the door. "I'll be fine," Evie assured him with a smile. "I'll make some lunch, maybe nap for a bit, and dinner will be waiting when you get home." "Don't worry." Walter kissed her cheek, nodded, and headed for the car. The door closed behind him, and the house fell silent again. Evie walked into their bedroom and picked up her phone from the nightstand. A new message had arrived from Louise Mitchell, a longtime friend who used to work at the school board. "District retiree reunion next month. Hope to see you and Walter there. We all miss you." Evie sat down, reading the message over and over. Louise had worked in the district for nearly 3 decades. If anyone knew what happened to Howard Fielding after he left, it would be her. Evie didn't want to suspect him. He had always been so good with children, always kind. But the image of that Cadillac wouldn't leave her mind. Without thinking too much, she tapped on Louise's number and called. "Evie, what a lovely surprise," Louise answered warmly. "Did you get my text about the reunion?" "I did," Evie replied. "Walter and I will try to make it. How have you been?" They caught up for a few minutes, sharing updates and stories. Then Evie gently shifted the conversation. "Louise, do you remember Mr. Howard Fielding from Oak Ridge Elementary?" "Oh, of course. Howard was a great teacher. The kids adored him. What a loss when he left." "Do you happen to know where he went?" Evie asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "I remember we threw him a farewell party. He said he was moving to teach at another school." There was a pause. "Actually, that's not quite how I remember it," Louise said thoughtfully. "He never filed a transfer. Not with us. And not with any other district as far as I know. He didn't continue teaching in the public system. Evie sat upright. Wait, he didn't? No, Louise confirmed. From what I heard, he moved to a rural area somewhere in Texas and started some kind of private program. A charity farm for kids, I think. A farm? Evie repeated, confused. Yeah, not a school. More like a home for underprivileged youth. Someone told me the name a while back. Let me think. Louise paused for a moment. Ah, got it. It's called Howard's Haven for Hope. Evie repeated the name under her breath, locking it in her memory. But why are you asking about Howard all of a sudden? Louise asked. Evie hesitated. I just remembered his Cadillac, and I saw one in an old photo that looked exactly like it. Oh yes, he had that gorgeous Cadillac, Louise said, chuckling. But he rarely drove it. That car was his pride and joy, more of a collector's piece than something he actually used. Do you remember exactly when he left town? Evie asked, her heart picking up pace. It was so long ago, Evie. I really can't say for sure. After hanging up, Evie moved quickly to the small home office. She sat at the computer and typed in the name, Howard's Haven for Hope. A basic website popped up, plain layout, minimal information, but it was real. She stared at the screen, a strange weight settling over her chest. Something wasn't adding up. The homepage of Howard's Haven for Hope showed smiling young men and boys working across wide fields, surrounded by barns and open sky. Most of them appeared to be of Hispanic or Mexican heritage. Dark hair, sun-warmed skin, wide grins. Nothing about the site seemed out of place. In fact, it looked hopeful. Evie clicked through the photo gallery. The images painted a picture of a peaceful, supportive environment. Clean dormitories, group meals, farming lessons, school books. Howard himself appeared in several photos, always smiling, always surrounded by children. His profile mentioned a background in education and a lifelong passion for helping kids. The mission statement focused on empowerment, education, and creating better futures for immigrant youth. It all looked good, too good to ignore. Evie found an address and an email, but no phone number. She stared at the screen, debating. Maybe it was time to see Howard again. Maybe she could bring the photo. Just ask, gently, if that old Cadillac had ever been his. She checked the clock, 11:45 a.m. If she left soon, she could be there by early afternoon. It was just a 90-minute drive. Without hesitation, she picked up her phone and called Walter. "How's your appointment going?" she asked. "Still in the waiting room," he replied. "Why? Is everything okay?" "Yes, actually. I spoke to Louise Mitchell. She gave me some new information about Howard Fielding. He started a farm out here for kids. I want to visit. Today. Will you come with me?" There was a pause. "I don't know, Evie," Walter said carefully. "I'm a little concerned. You've been really focused on this Cadillac thing." "I know how it sounds," she said gently, "but I'm not accusing anyone. I just want peace of mind. It would be nice to reconnect with Howard, and the place looks like it's doing something good." Walter agreed after a moment. "All right, but let's try contacting him first. I didn't find a number, just an email. I'll send a message now, but we might get there before he sees it." They agreed to meet at the clinic. Walter would finish his appointment, and Evie would take the bus to join him. "I'm leaving now," she said, already grabbing her purse. "See you soon." She locked the door and walked briskly to the bus stop, 3 blocks away. The Texas heat was already building. Thankfully, the bus arrived just as she got there. During the short ride, her mind was racing with questions. What exactly had Howard been doing all these years? Why hadn't anyone mentioned him before? As she stepped off the bus, a young woman in a wide straw hat and bright yellow shirt handed her a colorful flyer. "County Agricultural Fair this week," the woman said cheerfully, then moved on. Evie glanced at the flyer as she walked. It listed a week-long schedule, local food, games, competitions. But one line caught her attention: a special livestock auction happening today, just a few miles from the address she'd found for Howard's farm. "Huh," she murmured, slipping the flyer into her purse as she approached the clinic. Inside, she spotted Walter at the front counter. He smiled as soon as he saw her. "Perfect timing," he said. "Dr. Matthews says everything looks great. My blood pressure's finally in check." "That's such a relief," Evie replied, and meant it. "Ready for our little road trip?" Soon, they were driving through winding Texas backroads, the suburbs slowly giving way to farmland. "Did you hear back from the email?" Walter asked, glancing at her. "Not yet," she replied, pulling the fare flyer from her purse. "But look, this came from the bus stop. There's a big event going on today near Howard's farm. The auction is just a few minutes from his place." Walter took a quick look at the flyer. "Do you think he'll be there?" "Maybe," Evie said, "but let's visit the farm first, as planned. If he's not there, we can swing by the auction." After more than an hour of driving, they turned onto a gravel road marked by a simple wooden sign: Howard's Haven for Hope. Ahead, the property spread out. Barns, a large farmhouse, neat fields, and what looked like dorm-style buildings. The place was quiet, peaceful, almost too still. As they stepped out of the car, a young man exited one of the barns, probably in his early 20s, Hispanic with work gloves tucked into his belt. He noticed them and approached with a polite smile. "Hello there," Walter called out with a wave. "Hi," the young man replied. "Can I help you?" "We're looking for Mr. Howard Fielding," Evie said. "Is this his farm?" "Yes, ma'am," he nodded. "This is Mr. Fielding's place." "Do you know if he's here? We're old friends from when he was a teacher." The young man looked at them thoughtfully. "I actually sent an email to the address listed on the website," Evie said politely. The young man nodded. "Ah, that's probably the old one. We've been switching emails recently, but the site hasn't been updated yet. Sorry about that." He glanced toward the barns. "Mr. Fielding isn't here right now. Most of the staff and kids are at the county agricultural event. There's a big auction today, and we've got a booth there to promote our program." "Yes, we just heard about the fair," Evie replied, trying not to let her disappointment show. She turned slightly, ready to head back to the car, but Walter gently touched her arm. "Since we're already here," he said, turning to the young man, "do you think we could take a quick look around? We'd really like to see what Howard has built here." The young man hesitated, then smiled. "Let me check with our on-site supervisor. One moment." He stepped away, made a brief call, and returned with a nod. "That's fine. I'd be happy to give you a short tour." For the next 30 minutes, they followed him around the property. He showed them the barns where they kept animals, the horse stables, and the crop fields where the children learned about farming firsthand. As they walked, he explained the program's purpose, providing a safe space for immigrant youth to learn, grow, and gain skills through agriculture and education. Then he led them toward a barn unlike the others. Its exterior was covered in colorful, playful murals, handprints, farm animals, childlike suns and clouds. "This is one of our creative barns," the young man said. "It's designed for younger kids to get messy, play, and learn through hands-on activities. Mr. Fielding really believes in making farm life fun." Inside, they found a man arranging supplies on low tables. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, with thick black curly hair and fair skin. His smile, wide and bright, stood out immediately. "Ferdinand, these folks are friends of Mr. Fielding," their guide explained. They stopped by hoping to see him. Ferdinand wiped his hands on a towel and stepped forward, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ferdinand, Activities Coordinator." "Walter and Evie Marlowe," Walter said, shaking his hand. "I'm just setting up a few demo stations," Ferdinand explained, gesturing around. "We've got investors and visitors coming by this week. It's a good chance to show them how we work with the kids." He moved easily between the tables, explaining each one with enthusiasm. I've been here a long time. Since I was 6, actually. Mr. Howard brought me here when I had nowhere to go. You knew him as a teacher then? Evie asked, watching him closely. Oh yes, Ferdinand said with a nostalgic smile. He was the first adult I truly trusted. He's always had a way with kids. Evie glanced around, taking in the space. One entire wall was covered in children's artwork, crayon drawings, collages made with leaves and oats, even designs created with glued-on pasta and rice. Her eyes caught on one image, a red Cadillac, carefully crafted from colored grains of rice, each detail strikingly precise. That car, she said softly, pointing to the picture. Mr. Howard always loved that Cadillac. Ferdinand smiled. He still has it. Drove it out this morning, actually. He looked at the drawing with pride. That one's mine. I made it as an example for the kids. That's why it's a bit more detailed. Theirs are more imaginative, he added with a chuckle, glancing at the surrounding chaos of creativity. A strange chill moved across Evie's skin. Her eyes lingered on Ferdinand, his wide smile, his hands, his posture. Something about him felt familiar in a way she couldn't quite explain. Ferdinand noticed her gaze. Is everything all right, ma'am? He asked, a little uneasy. Walter gently placed his hand on Evie's back, a quiet reminder to stay calm. Yes, I'm sorry, she said quickly. The kids' artwork just reminded me of my boys. That's all. After a brief silence, she asked softly, Do you have any siblings, Ferdinand? Evie. Walter's voice was low, careful. Ferdinand let out a soft laugh. I do, actually. My brother's at the fair today with Mr. Howard, helping out at the booth. He checked his watch. You should stop by if you have time. There's a kids' performance and the auction later on. It's a big day. They thanked him and made their way back toward the front of the property. As they walked, Evie glanced back at the barn one last time, her thoughts spinning with questions she didn't know how to ask yet. At the car, they turned to their young guide. Thank you for the tour, Evie said quietly, hands trembling slightly as she buckled her seatbelt. Walter glanced at the GPS. The auction's only about 20 minutes from here. Want to go? Evie looked straight ahead, her voice steady but tense. Yes, she said. I need to speak with Mr. Fielding. As they turned back onto the gravel road, Walter glanced sideways at his wife. Her jaw was set, her hands were clenched, and her eyes were locked on something far away, on memories perhaps, or on the moment she was racing to catch up to. Evie, why did you ask Ferdinand such a personal question? About having siblings? Walter asked as the car moved steadily through the quiet country road. Evie stared out the window, watching the farmland roll past in a blur of greens and golds. I don't know, she murmured. When I saw that Cadillac drawing, then looked at his smile, his hair, something just felt off, or maybe too familiar. She turned toward Walter. He reminded me of Lucas. Walter sighed. Evie, I know how this must feel, but they're not the same. Hair and a smile don't mean... I know, she said quickly. I know how it sounds. I wasn't trying to be inappropriate. I couldn't shake the feeling. Walter gently patted her hand, but didn't say anything more. The rest of the short drive passed in silence, both lost in their thoughts. They soon arrived at the county fairgrounds. Colorful tents and booths filled the wide field, with tractors and farming equipment on display near the center. It was a lively scene. Farmers, families, kids laughing in the sun. No auction right now, Walter said, checking a large schedule posted near the gate. Looks like we just missed it. They strolled through the fairgrounds, stopping occasionally to admire livestock or new agricultural inventions. Then, about 10 minutes in, Evie spotted it. A white tent with a blue banner reading, Howard's Haven for Hope. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing beneath the banner, deep in conversation with a pair of well-dressed visitors, was Howard Fielding. Though his hair had turned stark white and time had carved deep lines into his face, Evie recognized him instantly. His gestures were still animated, his posture familiar, his presence unchanged. They waited politely until the couple moved on, then stepped forward. "Mr. Fielding?" Walter said. "Howard Fielding?" The man turned to them, his smile professional but uncertain. "Yes, can I help you?" "You probably don't remember us," Evie said. "I'm Evie Marlowe, and this is my husband Walter. Our sons, Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel, were your students at Oak Ridge Elementary." Howard's brow furrowed as he studied their faces. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. I'm nearly 70 now. Memory's not what it used to be," he said, tapping his temple with a light chuckle. "Can you believe that?" Evie stepped closer. "I helped organize your farewell party back then, with the other moms. If there was ever a woman chasing around 3 identical boys like ducklings, it was me." Slow recognition crept across Howard's face. Then he smiled warmly. "Of course, the Marlows, Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel. Such bright boys." His smile softened. "It's good to see you both after all these years." "We were surprised to learn about your farm," Walter said. "It's an impressive place." Howard nodded. "Thank you. It's been my mission for a long time." But soon, the conversation turned. "We heard you left town just before the boys went missing," Evie said carefully. Howard's expression darkened. "Yes, I did hear about that. A terrible tragedy. I was devastated." "I always thought you moved to another state to keep teaching," Evie said, watching him closely. "No," Howard replied. "I stayed in Texas, moved to a small town to get a certification. I wanted to start something like this." He gestured around the tent. Evie hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Mr. Fielding, do you remember the exact date you left town? Was it before or after our boys disappeared?" Howard didn't flinch. "Before," he said quickly. "I'm sure of it. Otherwise, the police would have spoken to me. They never did." Without answering, Evie opened her purse and pulled out the photo, the same one they'd studied that morning. She handed it to Howard. "This picture was taken just an hour before they vanished," she said quietly. "This here, at the edge of the frame. That's your Cadillac, isn't it?" Walter stepped in gently. "Did you drive through our neighborhood that day? Do you remember parking near our home?" Howard's expression changed. His smile faded, his eyes narrowed, and for a moment he said nothing, just stared at the photo. "I can't remember the exact day I left," he finally said, his voice more measured now. "And I certainly don't recall driving through your neighborhood. I didn't see your boys. I'm sorry." He handed the photo back to Evie. "That car could have belonged to someone else." Walter nodded, placing a hand on Evie's shoulder. "Well, at least we asked." Evie nodded slowly too, but she noticed something had shifted in Walter. His posture was tighter now, and he cleared his throat as he glanced away. Howard looked at them, his face unreadable. "Do you believe that car was somehow connected to your son's disappearance?" "We don't know," Walter replied. "It wasn't something the police ever brought up. We just noticed it in the photo this morning." Howard checked his watch. "It's almost 3:30, he said, turning to 2 nearby volunteers. "We'll need to start wrapping things up before 4. Once everything had been packed up at the booth, Howard turned back to Evie and Walter. "You two should enjoy the fair while you can. In about 5 minutes, the children from our farm will be performing a closing number," he said, gesturing toward a small stage on the far side of the grounds. "It's a sweet little show. I think you'll enjoy it." "Thank you," Walter said with a nod. "It was good to see you again, Howard." They turned to leave the tent, but as they walked away, Evie fell a few steps behind. She heard Howard's voice, lower now, urgent, speaking quickly into his phone. "Leave immediately after the performance. Get Diego here." "Yes, now." Evie froze mid-step. She turned back slightly, just enough to glimpse Howard coordinating with his staff, showing no sign he'd noticed her. She quickly caught up to Walter, her thoughts spinning and her pulse quickening. They made their way to the small outdoor stage where a group of children, most appearing to be between 6 and 9 years old, had gathered to sing. Their voices rang out in Spanish, a cheerful folk tune echoing over the fairgrounds. But Evie's mind was elsewhere. Her eyes moved across the crowd, scanning each staff member, each corner of the field, looking for something, anything out of place. Then she saw him. A man emerged from behind the stage, walking quickly toward the vendor tents. His pace was brisk, focused. From even that distance, Evie could see his thick, curly black hair. "Walter," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Look, over there. That man. Doesn't he look like Ferdinand?" Walter followed her gaze, his expression sharpening. "Yes," he said slowly. "The resemblance is striking." "Do you think they're twins?" Evie asked, barely able to contain the emotion in her voice. Before Walter could respond, she was already moving, carefully weaving through the crowd, staying just far enough behind to watch the man without being seen. Walter followed close behind. They circled around a cotton candy stand and positioned themselves near the edge of Howard's booth, staying low-key, just observers in the flow of the fair. The man had reached the tent and was now speaking with Howard, his movements quick, his gestures animated. As he turned slightly, Evie caught a clear view of his face. She gasped softly. It was like looking at Ferdinand again. The same bright smile, the same thick brows, the same way of talking with his hands. "That must be the brother," she whispered. "Diego, the one Howard called for." Walter didn't speak, but his face had gone pale. His eyes fixed on the man, then flicked back to Evie. That same smile, that same build, that same energy. Could they be... Evie barely managed the words. Lucas and Noah? She gripped Walter's arm. Remember how Gabriel always had the smallest eyes? He was easier to tell apart. And Noah, he had that thicker brow. And Lucas, always the loudest, always the first to run toward something new. They watched as Howard suddenly gestured sharply. Both he and Diego turned from the booth and began walking quickly toward the parking area. Several staff members looked confused, clearly unaware of what was happening. "Why are they in such a hurry?" Evie's voice rose, thick with worry. "We should follow them. I need to talk to him." She started to move, but Walter gently held her back. "Evie, wait. What if we're wrong? If they really are our sons, then Gabriel should be here too. Let's check first. If we find him, we call the authorities. Let them investigate the rest." Evie hesitated, torn, but then nodded. "You're right. We know where the farm is. We can return if we have to." They split up, moving quickly through the fairgrounds, checking behind vendor tents, scanning every young man and older teen in sight. But there was no sign of a third look-alike, no sign of Gabriel. Maybe we're wrong," Walter said, though his voice lacked conviction. But Evie was already walking back toward the Howard's Haven booth. Only one staff member remained, an older man, perhaps late 60s, with sun-worn skin and calloused hands. He was gently packing away the last of their materials. "Excuse me," Evie said, trying to sound calm. "We were at the farm earlier today and met someone named Ferdinand. We saw another young man who looked just like him. Diego, I think. Are they related?" The man looked up with a friendly smile and nodded. "Yes, they're brothers." "Brothers," Evie repeated. Her heart pounded. The man chuckled. "Well, actually, fun fact, they're triplets. The third one's not here today. He works at Mr. Howard's private estate. It's not far from the farm." Evie and Walter stared at him, stunned. Their eyes locked, equal parts fear, disbelief, and a flicker of hope. "Where is this estate?" they asked together, voices overlapping. The man blinked, clearly startled by their intensity. "I'm sorry, I can't share that. It's private property. Mr. Fielding values his privacy." He handed them a brochure. "Here's our main address if you want to learn more about the farm or our programs." Walter took it politely, though they already had the information. "Thanks. We appreciate your time." But as they turned to walk away, both knew this wasn't over. Not even close. They stepped away from the booth, finding a quiet corner behind one of the livestock tents. Somewhere, no one could overhear them. "Walter," Evie whispered, her voice trembling. "Triplets. They're triplets. And they're the right age." "Ferdinand said he's been with Howard since he was 6, Walter said, running a hand through his hair. His expression was tight, stunned. That can't be a coincidence. The Cadillac in the photo, Howard's reaction, and now 3 men who look exactly alike? "Our boys," Evie said, her voice cracking as tears filled her eyes. After all these years, could it really be them? Without another word, they rushed toward the parking lot, scanning every direction. But Howard and Diego were nowhere in sight. Walter jumped into the car and started the engine. "We're going back to the farm," he said, gripping the wheel tightly. "That's where they're most likely headed." As the tires kicked up gravel, Evie grabbed her phone and quickly dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, she asked to be connected with a detective familiar with their case. Within moments, she was transferred to Detective Martinez from the Missing Persons Unit. "This is going to sound unbelievable," Evie began, her voice shaking. "But I think my husband and I may have just found our sons, the ones who went missing back in 1981. She told him everything. The photo, the Cadillac, Howard Fielding's sudden departure, the 2 men they saw who looked like each other, and like her boys. There was even a 3rd brother, she explained, who worked at a private residence. All 3 the right age, the same features." The line was quiet for a beat. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Marlowe," Detective Martinez said, his tone calm but firm. "But I need you to promise, do not confront Mr. Fielding on your own. He was once a respected member of the community. We need to handle this by the book. My team is already on the way. I've contacted the local sheriff's department. They should arrive within 10 minutes. "We're almost there," Walter said, turning onto the gravel road that led back to Howard's haven for hope. "If you see him," the detective added, "keep your distance. The fact that he left early with one of the men is concerning, but we have to be careful." "We will," Evie said, keeping the line open as they parked behind a grove of trees, just far enough to remain hidden, but close enough to watch. Minutes passed. The property remained still. But then the front door opened, and 3 figures emerged: Howard, Ferdinand, Diego. They moved quickly, tossing bags into the trunk of a car. "They're leaving," Evie whispered into the phone. "They're all getting into a vehicle right now." "Stay where you are," Martinez replied. "We found the farm is registered under another name. We're issuing search warrants now for both the farm and the private residence." Just as the vehicle began pulling away, 2 sheriff's cruisers turned onto the property, lights flashing. They blocked the road ahead, stopping the car. "They're here," Evie said, her heart racing. "Do not get out of your car until I give the word," the detective instructed. Through the windshield, Evie and Walter watched the standoff unfold. 4 deputies approached the vehicle, cautious, hands near their belts. Howard stepped out first, his hands raised, his face tight and unreadable. Ferdinand and Diego followed slowly, clearly confused. The deputy spoke with Howard, who gestured toward the house, shaking his head emphatically. Walter leaned forward. "They're hesitating. Howard must have a good reputation here." They could hear bits of conversation float in on the breeze. "Longtime community supporter? Must be a misunderstanding." "I can't wait," Evie said, dropping her phone into her purse, but keeping the line open. "They're going to let him walk." Before Walter could stop her, she was already out of the car, striding toward the deputies and the group gathered near the vehicle. "Howard Fielding!" she called, her voice ringing across the yard. Heads turned. Howard's expression shifted when he recognized her. His eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, please return to your vehicle," one of the deputies said, stepping forward. "We're handling it." Evie didn't stop. She reached into her purse and pulled out the old photograph. Holding it up high, she addressed the deputies and everyone watching. "If you're even thinking about letting this man go," she said, her voice steady, "then you need to see this." She held out the photograph. "These are my sons, Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel Marlowe. They disappeared on June 12, 1981. This photo was taken the very morning they vanished." She turned and pointed directly at Ferdinand and Diego. "And here are two of them, right in front of you." The crowd fell silent. Ferdinand and Diego moved closer, eyes fixed on the photo. Their expressions shifted, from confusion to disbelief. "That's us," Ferdinand said softly. "That's me, with Marco." "Is there a third brother?" one of the deputies asked. Both men nodded slowly, eyes still locked on the photo. "I did nothing wrong," Howard suddenly said, his voice sharp, rising above the silence. "I saved them. They were abandoned." "These were my children," Evie said, her voice cracking as she held up the photo. "They weren't abandoned. They disappeared while playing outside our house one afternoon." She pointed to the edge of the image. "That's your Cadillac in the background, isn't it, Howard? The same one you still own." Howard didn't answer. His jaw tensed, but it was Diego who spoke up quietly. "It's in the garage, near the farmhouse. He still has it." Ferdinand looked between Evie and Walter. "Are you really our parents?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Howard told us you were in prison." Tears streamed down Evie's cheeks as she stepped closer. "Yes," she said, "we're your parents, but we were never in prison. That man has been lying to you for your entire lives." She looked into their faces, seeing shades of the little boys she'd lost. "You've grown so much, just like Walter and I always hoped you would." "We're 36 now," Diego said slowly, as though trying to convince himself it was possible. "That's right," Evie replied. "You were born on February 15th, 1975. The deputies exchanged looks. Then the lead officer stepped forward. "Mr. Fielding, turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are now considered the primary suspect in the 1981 missing persons case." One officer handcuffed Howard, while another called in the warrant for the private residence. The peaceful farm erupted into coordinated movement. More police vehicles arrived. Detectives fanned out. Technicians began searching buildings. Officers spoke with Ferdinand and Diego separately. Inside the garage, they found the Cadillac. Its cherry red paint faded with time but still recognizable. In Howard's office, they uncovered the original license plate, tucked into a locked drawer, along with documents listing Ferdinand, Diego, and Marco under fabricated names. "They should be Lucas, Noah, and Gabriel," Evie said quietly as she watched the evidence being tagged. "I know Ferdinand is Lucas. He has the same wide smile. Diego is Noah. He always had that calm strength, that quickness. So Marco? Marco must be Gabriel." "They're not even Mexican," Walter added, his voice measured. "We do have mixed ancestry, yes, but not enough to explain how easily they were passed off." When detectives asked about their third brother, Ferdinand spoke up. "Marco was never with us at the farm. Howard kept him at his estate. He said Marco worked with the youngest kids." "Howard told us he rescued us," Diego added. "He said our parents had done something terrible, that we were alone. We believed it. We were so young." A detective leaned in gently. "What did he do to you?" Both men were quiet. Nothing bad in the last 20 years, Ferdinand finally said. He expected complete obedience, everything by his rules. But our childhood, Diego's voice faltered. It was harsh. He'd make us strip, said it was punishment. He touched us sometimes. It felt wrong. And then he'd hit us with a rattan stick, told us we had to be corrected, that we were disobedient, that we deserved it. He looked away. For years we believed it, especially me, he added softly. We thought we were just bad kids. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the farm, an officer approached with an update. We found Marco, he reported. He was at the estate, along with 8 other children, all between the ages of 4 and 10. They're being transported to the hospital now. Most are shaken, but Marco, he's safe, physically okay. We've explained the situation to him. He's confused, but calm. Evie's hand flew to her chest. Can we see him? You'll all be reunited at the police station, the officer assured her. He's on his way. As darkness fell, Evie and Walter were escorted to a patrol car. Ferdinand and Diego rode in separate vehicles, each accompanied by detectives. Evie reached for Walter's hand as they drove away from the farm, a place that had been both a prison and a twisted version of home for their sons. Our boys, she whispered, barely believing it. We found our boys. The police station was lit with buzzing fluorescent lights. Evie sat in a small interview room, a paper cup of coffee untouched in front of her. Across the table, Detective Martinez turned on a small recorder. Please, he said gently, walk me through what happened, from the beginning. Evie took a steady breath. Our neighborhood was close-knit back then, she began. Everyone knew everyone. Howard Fielding was one of the most trusted people in town. He was the boys' favorite teacher. He used to give kids rides home, with parents' permission, of course. She paused, her fingers folded tightly in her lap. The day it happened, we were both home. I was doing laundry. Walter was fixing something out back. The boys were just playing in the front yard. It was a different time. We never thought they weren't safe. You didn't see anyone take them? Martinez asked softly. Evie shook her head. No. One moment they were there, and the next, they were just gone. Martinez nodded slowly, making notes. We've interviewed Mr. Fielding and the staff at the farm. Given his age and health, it seems he's decided to tell us everything. He wants to fight the charges, Detective Martinez said, scanning the report in front of him. Evie sat up straighter. What did you just say? He claims he always felt connected to the triplets. That's the word he used, the detective continued. He says the day before he supposedly left town, he decided he couldn't bear to part with them. He flipped a page in his notes. He lured them with an offer of ice cream and a ride in his Cadillac. Apparently the boys were fascinated by the car. Lucas especially, Evie whispered, remembering. The kidnapping was premeditated, Martinez went on. He packed essentials ahead of time, forged documents for crossing county lines, and later returned under a new identity. He purchased the farm property with cash, using a shell company, and presented himself as someone running a non-profit for migrant children. Walter, now seated beside her, asked the question that had haunted them both. But how could no one have seen anything? No screams, no struggle. To the outside world, Martinez explained, Mr. Howard was a trusted adult. The boys knew him. He was their teacher. He offered them something innocent, a treat and a ride. And they were known to wander within the block, right? Evie nodded. Yes, they often walked the neighborhood. No one would have thought twice. Exactly, the detective said. He told them their home wasn't safe, that their parents were in trouble. Over time, he convinced them not to go back. They trusted him so completely at that age, it wasn't hard to manipulate them. They were only 6 years old. Walter reached for Evie's hand and held it tightly. He told them they were orphans, Martinez said quietly, that their parents had broken the law, that they were living under false names and had gone to prison. He created fake photo albums to support the story, fabricated memories, a new identity. Evie shook her head, struggling to comprehend. So, the reason he took them was just because he felt some strange connection? Martinez's face turned grim. We looked into his past. In the early 1970s, Fielding lost his wife and twin sons in a house fire. According to psychiatric reports, he suffered a psychological break. Outwardly, he managed to function, but internally, something fractured. He began to believe certain children, especially siblings with strong emotional bonds, were meant to be his. Evie's breath caught. 30 years, stolen because of one man's delusion. "What happens now?" Walter asked, his voice low. "He's being charged with multiple counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, identity fraud, and more. The other children from the estate are being examined and identified. We're working to locate their families." The detective stood, walked to the door, and spoke quietly to someone outside. "I believe," he said, turning back to them, "there are 3 people who've waited long enough to see you." A moment later, the door opened again, and there they were: Ferdinand, Diego, Marco, Lucas, Noah, Gabriel. They stood silently in the doorway, grown men now, but in their eyes, their posture, their very presence, Evie could still see her little boys. Lucas with his wide-open smile, Noah calm and thoughtful, Gabriel smaller in build, with that same quiet strength she'd always remembered. For a long time, no one moved. 30 years of silence hung heavy in the room. A lifetime of missed birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, and whispered goodnights, all lost to time. Then Evie rose, a soft sob escaping her lips. She took one step, then another. Walter stood beside her, eyes wet. "My boys," she whispered. "My beautiful boys." And something in her voice shattered the invisible wall. Lucas moved first, 3 long strides across the room, and wrapped his arms around her. Noah and Gabriel followed, and Walter stepped forward, folding them all into his embrace. 5 people clinging to one another, unwilling to let go, as if they feared they might disappear again. Tears streamed down Evie's cheeks as she touched each of their faces, memorizing every line, every feature aged by time, but unmistakably theirs. "I never stopped looking," she whispered, "not for one single day." "We didn't know," Gabriel said quietly. "We thought you were gone. But we're here now," Walter said, his voice thick. "We're all here now." Outside the window, stars dotted the deep Texas sky. Inside that small station, beneath harsh fluorescent light, a family, torn apart by obsession and deception, began their first fragile steps toward healing. For the first time in 3 decades, they were whole again,